portions in the book.
Can we do calendar first?
Okay.
I just, as many of you know, we lost Roz Weissman this week. And after the sisterhood meeting on Wednesday, there will be a Shiva in the chapel at Resnick at 11 a.m. The funeral is Monday and it's private. So that's why we felt we needed to do something for Roz's friends. So it'll be 11 o'clock in the chapel at Resnick this Wednesday. Everybody is welcome. If you knew Roz, we'll be doing some prayers and just remembering her. But also Sisterhood is having a happy hour for dim sum on the 13th. It's girls' night out, so any females are welcome. It's a dim sum house on Westwood at 5 o'clock. And that's it.
Thanks, Cindy. So as I was saying, this is the last section of the Book of Numbers, and in accordance with our long-held tradition, we are going to have our end of the book Slivovitz Siyum.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So
Yeah, I'm having a bad hair day.
the last verse of our portion is Numbers chapter 36:13, and it's on page 1248 of the Plout and page 1029 of the Women's Commentary. Who would like to read the last line?
I haven't even found.
I'm sorry, Donna, let me have those parts again, not the pages, but the parts.
Sure. It's
Numbers, what was
Numbers 36:13 is the last line.
36:13.
And after it is read, we will say our traditional expression of strength from Torah study, which is chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. But first, let's hear the last line. Do I have a volunteer?
36:13.
Rebecca.
Okay.
Please.
Chapter 36, verse 13.
Mm-hmm.
These are the commandments and the ordinances which the Lord commanded by Moses to the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho.
Thank you. And chazak,
Chazak.
v'nit chazek. Let us be strong, and let us strengthen one another. And now the most important part, the Slivovitz toast.
Do you really have Slivovitz?
I really have Slivovitz. I got it for you in your honor.
I want to know how Stanley is because I missed the opening. What happened? No, we're not talking about it.
I don't, but I hope this is kosher, even though it's not Slivovitz.
Well, let's hope for the best. So we'll say the blessing. This is Borei Pri Ha'etz because Slivovitz is made out of plums, not grapes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei Pri Ha'etz.
Adoma.
Chaim.
Ooh, she put it away. Ooh, wow.
And to the Chevra Torah and to a speedy recovery for Rabbi Stan.
Right on. Speedy recovery.
Okay. Oops. So let's get down to business now after all this drinking. So let's talk a little bit about the Book of Numbers before we get started on the specifics. As you all know, other parts of the Book of Numbers have all sorts of exciting stories, like people getting swallowed up by the earth, talking donkeys. This is not one of those sections. However, there still are quite a few interesting things in the portion that we could talk about. The making of vows by women, men and women. There's the cities of refuge for those people who commit manslaughter. There's the war against the Midianites. We have a full itinerary of all the stops the Israelites took on their journey through the wilderness. And last but not least, we have a reappearance of the daughters of Tzalafahad, who I assume you have met already. But we are not talking about any of those things. I thought this year it would be interesting to cover something a little bit different. Real estate. Now, and this is, of course, a little bit more than about land allotment to the tribes of Reuben and Gad. So we will have more to talk about than just real estate transactions. So if you could please turn to page 1226 of the Plout and page 1002 of the Women's Commentary. That's Numbers 32:1. And can I have a reader of the first 5 verses?
I don't know what page you're on.
I think I can do it.
I'm lost.
Okay, it's page, if you have the Plout, it's page 1226
No.
at the bottom.
You want me to read?
Are we there? Page 1226. Okay. Doris, would you please read?
Sure.
So
Is it-
read verse 1 through 5, please.
That the Reubenites and the Gadites, is that what we're talking about? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The Reubenites and the Gadites owned cattle in very great numbers. Noting that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were a region suitable for cattle, the Gadites and the Reubenites came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the chieftains of the community and said,
No.
Atorath, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshon, Eliecha, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon, the land that the Lord had conquered for the community of Israel in cattle country. And your servants have cattle. It would be a favor to us, they continued, if this land were given to your servants as a holding. Do not move us across the Jordan. Keep
Thank
going.
you. Who would like to read verses 6 through 15?
I'm lost.
We're now on page 1.
Diane, are you using the Plout or are you using a different book?
Really doesn't matter.
I'm
I'm
using
using the Plout and mine doesn't say anything like that.
Are you on Numbers
Okay, well,
32?
maybe this is an old version. Hey, all right. Hold on a second. It's more to the point. It's Numbers chapter 32.
Okay.
And we're on verse 6 through 15.
Donna, if you don't mind, I'll read.
Sure. Thank you, Herman.
Moses replied to the Gadites and the Reubenites, are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord had given them? That is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to survey the land. After going up to the Wadi Eshcol and surveying the land, they turned the minds of the Israelites from invading the land that the Lord had given them. Thereupon the Lord was incensed, and he swore, none of the men from 20 years up who came out of Egypt shall see the land that I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for they did not remain loyal to me. None except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, for they remained loyal to the Lord. The Lord was incensed at Israel, and for 40 years he made them wander in the wilderness, until the whole generation that had provoked the Lord's displeasure was gone. And now you, a breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers to add still further to the Lord's wrath against Israel. If you turn away from him and he abandons them once more in the wilderness, you will bring calamity upon all this people.
Thank you. One more reader, verses 16 through 24.
I'll read.
Yes. Go ahead.
And they approached him and said, sheep enclosures we shall build here for our livestock, and towns for our little ones. And as for us, we shall head out swiftly in the vanguard before the Israelites until we bring them to their place. And our little ones will dwell in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until the Israelites take possession of every man of his estate. For we will not take possession with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, for our estate has come to us on the side of the Jordan to the east. And Moses said to them, if you will do this thing, if you go out in the vanguard to battle before the Lord, and every member of the vanguard among you crosses the Jordan before the Lord until he dispossesses his enemies before him, and the land is conquered before the Lord, then you may return and you will be clear of the Lord of Israel, and this landing will be a holding for you before the Lord. Is that it?
Keep going.
Okay.
Two more.
And
But
sorry. And should you not thus look, you will have offended to the Lord, and know your offense, which will find you. Build your towns for your little ones, and enclosures for your sheep, and the utterance of your mouth you shall do. And the Gadites and the Reubenites said to Moses, saying, your servants will do as my Lord charges. Our little ones, our wives, our livestock, and all our beasts will be there in the towns of Gilead. And your
okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so what is going on here? What is it that the tribes of Reuben and Gad are asking Moses for?
Not to cross over, but to settle on the other side of the Jordan.
Okay, so God has said we're all going to go to the other side. We're going to conquer the land. And they're saying, you know what? We don't want to go so far because we like the land better on this side because it's good for cattle. So why is Moses so angry with them?
They're not doing what he wants.
Mm-hmm. Steve?
Well, I think he feels he needs everyone to take the risk and continue fighting to fulfill God's wishes.
Good. Anything else? Donna?
I got my, I think it's exactly that. Disobedience, not listening to what the Lord wants. And I like it over here better, not consenting to God's counsel and wisdom. The crossover is rebellion.
Okay, thank you. Now, why does he mention this whole thing about what happened with Caleb and the spies and all that? What does that have to do with this situation? Larry?
Not just the fight that Moses wants them to be involved in, but Moses and the Lord have said that over there is the promised land. It's the very, very best. And here they are saying, no, we've not been there yet, but we think this is better. So they are not just disobeying, but distrusting Moses and God. And that poses a risk that the rest of the Israelites will, since they've been disobedient and willful in the past, might be again.
And what happened when they were willful and disobedient with the spies coming back and saying, this land's, it's too hard to conquer?
Oh my God,
what happened?
40 years in the desert, wandering around without a home.
So Moses is worried about there being another 40 years in the desert, right?
Yep.
Okay. I think I saw Kevin first.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering what this has to do 40 years ago in terms of you had, I guess you call them the spies coming back. What did they say? The land is not as fertile as it is over here. maybe the land is really fertile, and Hashem is saying, go over there and make the land fertile, and it'll become fertile when you make it fertile. But where they are, their cattle has flourished, and it sounds like their cattle will flourish if they have all the needs and everything, and that's not part of the fight, or I don't understand why it's part of the fight. I understand it's bringing everyone over, but are they part of the fight, or are they part of raising beef and bringing it to the community?
Well, that's the question. Are they part of the whole community, or and they just going to do what they feel like on their side, or are they going to join the whole community and conquer the land that God told them to? So that is what Moses is very upset about. Mara and Harv.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this whole parsha starts out with the notion of taking a vow. And so if you look at this part, it's in a certain way reneging on a vow that they, as part of the whole people, took. And that in itself seems a serious offense.
Okay, very good. Obviously, the Gadites and the Reubenites do not seem to think that there's anything particularly special about the land to the west of the Jordan. They're figuring, well, this is good land. Let's settle here because our cattle will be very happy. Also, if you will, yes, Mommy, also known as Natalie. I can't, you're muted. You're muted. Mommy, you're muted. You're muted.
I think we're talking about human nature. It is really very comforting, more comforting to stay with what you know, even if it isn't perfect, than to be starting something that you're not sure at all what it's going to be like. And when they came back and told these stories, it must have been very frightening for a lot of the people. So I just think that when you're dealing with humans and human nature, that you couldn't have expected them all to have wanted to go across so easily.
Very good. Yes, Merle.
Also, I'm thinking about this whole vow thing. I mean, even today, it's not easy for people to make a commitment. There's fear in making commitments, like what's on the other end.
Sure.
And I think,
who made this promise anyway?
Well, exactly. Who's expecting us to make
Did they
this vow?
sign up for this?
Why did that person become such an important part of running my life?
Exactly.
That's
well,
it.
And if you will notice too, the Reubenites and the Gadites say, what do they say they're going to do first in the land? They say we're going to build these habitations for our sheep and also cities for our children. Well, why is it that the sheep are named first
Good question.
ahead of the children? If you'll notice in the last line, Moses turns it around and says, no, build the cities for your children first and then deal with the animals. So their priorities are kind of screwed up on many levels. Rebecca.
I think the Reubenites and the Gadites just didn't want to go to war anymore. I don't know how big their individual tribes were, how many people were in that tribe, but how many did they lose during the Midnight War? So I'm thinking they just were tired of fighting. They didn't want to go to war anymore and perhaps lose more of their tribe.
And their cattle. Don't forget their cattle. We might lose some more of them. So given all of this, is Moses right to be so angry at them, or is he jumped to conclusions? Because he's obviously thinks that their motivation is just to do what they want for their own pleasure. Is that fair? I mean, after all, they do say, well, we'll go ahead and we'll go in the vanguard, and then when we're done fighting, we'll come back to our land. Is he right, or does he kind of jump to conclusions?
Sounds like he may be losing control, and he's probably not happy about that.
Yes, good point. Well, just so you know, most commentators do agree with Moses that he was right to be upset. On the other hand, we have our friend Nachmanides, who says, no, Moses misunderstood because they didn't phrase their request correctly. They said, don't make us go over there. And according to Nachmanides, their actual motivation was to acquire more land for everyone. What do you think their real motivation was in asking for this? Are they being selfish, or are they being practical in terms of let's get more land for everyone? What do you think? Marina?
Maybe they didn't want to compete with other tribes for set acreage of land, and decided we'll get something that's available now and let the others divide what's acquired anew.
Good. Did I see your hand, Brad? No, you're just rubbing your face. Okay. Any other thoughts about this? Yeah, Herman.
This is far out, and I mean really far out. But if I'm not mistaken, Reuben was the firstborn of Jacob. Am I right or wrong in that respect?
Correct.
Okay. If Reuben was the firstborn of Jacob, perhaps the tribe feels that they have the right as
the number one
descendants of the firstborn to do what they want to do and choose what they want to choose.
Interesting. Are there any
firstborns
out there that actually feel that way? Sorry, I'm a firstborn. Anyway, go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, first off, Donna, I want to say, thank you for leading this. This is like the first time we've gone over so many lines of the Torah. We normally only get to one or two words.
I'm very superficial, so
yeah. So I still think it's like I look at goats, for instance. Goats like undeveloped territories where they can, eat all the shrubs that are around. And then when you go into a developed territory, there aren't like free shrubs. I don't know where they get all their food from. So there's a question as to, do you raise a flock of, animals that is, overly abundant, where it's more than what is needed for the community, or do you make just as much? So when you suggested that Moses said, build the, community for the children first, and then the flocks or the, for the animals, in essence, it might not be as much, meat and animals if they go into a developed territory as opposed to an undeveloped territory. So I just wanted to point that out.
Interesting. Any other comments on this? Okay, so
yeah, I guess I do have a comment. That previous generation was denied entry into the promised land because they lacked faith. And the idea is here we're going to wait for a new generation to come along that'll have faith, and that was the reason for not letting the older generation in. And here's this new generation showing the same lack of faith. So I think it's a question of faith.
Absolutely. And that's what is making Moses so upset, because what happened when they lacked faith the first time? We wandered around the desert for 40 years. So we don't really want to do that again for another 40 years. Tamara, please.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question to begin with, and thank you for teaching. It's such a pleasure. I think what we see is a very common human phenomenon when people have a project without seeing all the consequences, the side effect. And in fact, the very last section is going to be back to the daughters of Zlofchad, where something like that happened also, when a decision was made and no one thought through all the consequences, and you had to say, oh, wait a minute, there is a fallout, we have to adjust it. So I see these two tribes really behaving rather normally. This is what's good for us, and they didn't think of the whole.
Exactly.
That's it.
So, Rabbi Donna Shapiro, who is absolutely no relation to me, raised the question about all of this. What is the message that we're getting from all this about when it's appropriate to advocate for your own interests and your own your selfish needs? And when is it appropriate to see yourself as part of something like a bigger whole? What does Moses think about this? What do you think about this? Donna.
Yes. I think it's always okay to celebrate yourself. If you don't love yourself, you can't love other people. Our first priority is to take care of what God gave us, our mind, our heart, our emotions, our spiritual lives, loving the Torah, loving God with all our heart, and the neighbors ourselves. And then as we do that as a community, we can then proceed to attempt to do everything else we need to do in the world. And that's my take on that.
Okay, very good. Steve?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think that the notion is
Love you, Steve.
To take care of one another, because if we have a strong community, then we have the ability to benefit from that and then work as best we can to help ourselves and our family. And that if you do it I'm not saying don't look out for yourself at all, but if you go too far and are selfish, the entire community suffers and you lose your cohesiveness.
I agree with that, but I mentioned community because we have to be care. Now you're right. You have to take care of yourself, eat right, exercise, be healthy, and to be in a position to help your community, or you're no good for anybody.
That's a good point. I mean, there's definitely some real life examples when you think about it. It's like when we consider, should we give tzedakah or should we save our money and take care of ourselves? What does our tradition say about that? Yes, Rebecca.
Well, we're obligated to give tzedakah, but not to the point where we impoverish ourselves. So it's kind of a balancing act. And sometimes when you help others, you actually are helping yourself also.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you that's sort of the message, is everything in moderation, that you have to take into whatever the question is, you have to balance the interests of the community and your own interests. So, which brings up a question like, what do you think our broader responsibilities are to the Jewish people? Yes, Tamara.
I'm thinking of that famous saying, if I'm only for if I'm not for myself, who am I? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So it's a matter of balance. And I think it's a dynamic relation. And
I mean, it's so interesting because I think that's what our whole tradition is about, is balancing things and not being too extreme in any particular direction. So this kind of brings up a question that I've been thinking about, and maybe we all have been thinking about a little bit, is what is the obligation of the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel? Would that be better for the community? Would it not be better? The commandment is in this section that says, you shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given the land to you to possess it. Now, does this commandment even still apply? What do you think? Steve?
Well, I think the commandment applies, but I think we live in a far different world than what existed 3,500 years ago. And I think that the rest of us, we need people elsewhere in the world actually to help accomplish the vision of having a homeland. And if we were actually all in Israel, I think it would be a much more difficult proposition to maintain that land and secure a place within the world community than having the diaspora.
Okay, I tend to agree. Does anybody have any other thoughts about that?
May I speak, Rabbi?
Merle, please.
Oh, Merle, okay.
I'm thinking, we have an obligation in whatever way we can to support Israel, but we can't all live there. And, when we have family and friends that live there, we support them and Israel in whatever way we can. I think we have to take our obligation for tzedakah and give it in whatever direction we can to help our community in whatever way we can. And Israel is part of our community.
Right.
And our family and friends that live there are a part of our community. But whenever I get, 100 emails a day asking me for money, I want to write them back and say, I have my choices and you aren't, though I would like to give you money, I can't. I have obligations.
Excellent. Excellent. Mara and Harv, did you have something?
So certainly none of the 10 commandments say, and so for all of you who are going to live in Israel, this is what I command you to do. Our responsibility as a people is to repair the world, not to simply live in Israel.
Right on, sister.
To live in the land that God gave us. So I think if we choose not to live in Israel, that perhaps we're doing the greater service to the world because others get to see how we behave, and we hopefully through our behavior influence others to be more compassionate, to be more humble, to be more just, to love others.
Very, very important. And I guess the thing is, if we didn't have people in the diaspora talking to our own government and sending support, there might not be a state of Israel. So it's kind of a complicated thing. But I have news for you. Maimonides agrees with most of you. And Maimonides did a whole compilation of all the mitzvot that are in the Torah, according to him. And he doesn't list this as one of them. He felt that this commandment was only applicable before the exile. And post-exile, we are only commanded to live in the land after redemption comes, the Messiah comes. So, but on the other hand, we've got our friend Nachmanides, who says living in Israel is equivalent to all the other mitzvot combined.
Rabbi, may I share something? What,
Hold on, I think tomorrow was first.
Okay, dear. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that what Maimonides says actually reflects the Bible itself. And as you said, before exile, it was one thing, but Jeremiah and other writings acknowledge that there is a diaspora. They urge people to pray for the government wherever they live, recognizing that the well-being of the Jews there is the same as that of the nation where they live. And then later on, people come back, but those who stay are expected to support the land of Israel and Jerusalem, but they are not expected to all make aliyah, to all immigrate and settle in the land. So Maimonides really follows where the Bible is on the topic.
So what is Nachmanides now?
Yeah, Maimonides is a different opinion.
Oh, such a smart ladies.
Okay. So
don't know if it's my turn, if I can say
oh,
something.
I'm sorry, Donna, go
No,
ahead.
no worries, love. You said you're so intelligent. I'm just listening to you. I learned a lot. To you and Tamar and Mar, you're amazing. I was about the diaspora and Israel, what we're discussing. I want to say the world news does not portray on America's Got Talent. There was Israeli children and Palestinian children in a music group singing together just 2 weeks ago. There are people that are wanting peace, and they don't put it in the news. They put all the fighting and all the other crap in the news. But I just want to say that the diaspora and loving Israel and loving our neighbors and loving one another. But I just want to bring that up. And thank you, ladies, for your. I'm just going to listen and not talk as much because you know so much more than I do. Thank you for Shabbat. It's a good Shabbos. I can be quiet now.
Shabbat shalom. And by the way, you don't have to know anything to participate in this. It's a matter of people's opinions, and they're all valid. Any other thoughts about living in the diaspora, making aliyah, preferring cattle over your children? Anything about that?
Oh my God, cattle over your children. No way.
Okay, let's see what else. Well, so let's get more specific about what our responsibilities are to the whole community. I'm sorry, Kevin?
Okay, I'm looking at line 6, where it says, "Are your brothers to go to war while you stay here?" The term brothers, I mean, when I think of brother, I think of immediate family brother. I don't know what the Hebrew meaning of brother means, and if there is a huge division amongst the tribes and they're still called brothers. That's one of my questions. The other is the next line, which is line 7. Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites from crossing? So they have a big say, because it sounds like they have the cattle or most of the meat, where even the offerings to God is a big smoked roast or whatever you call it. Without the meat, the community can't survive, so they need absolutely everyone. But those are the two. I guess the main thing is, were they brothers, or did they hate each other?
Well, think about that. Well, sometimes brothers hate each other, right? The tribes are all descended from 12 brothers, right? So technically they are all brothers / cousins. We're all related. You could also say just people are all descended from Adam and Eve, so we are all brothers and sisters. I don't know, maybe Tamara or Stan knows if there's some significance to the use of the word.
But you also have like Cain and Abel, who were brothers.
Exactly. Well, there are loads of unhappy brothers in the Torah. Think about it. Name one generation where there is not a problem with brothers. You know, Esau and Jacob. We have Ishmael and Isaac. On and on and on and on. So, yeah, so brother is not necessarily going to indicate love. It just means we're related and we belong to a family. And some people say that's the Jewish people. We are a family. Brad.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the resolution of this conflict here, because these two tribes, correct me if I'm wrong, they do end up going into Israel, and then they come back and they resettle in this land.
So they keep their promise.
They keep their promise. Are we to look at this as a successful resolution of a problem, or as some kind of betrayal?
Interesting. What do you think?
Well, to me, it seems to be a problem that's been successfully resolved. So having your cake and eating it too, entering into the land of Israel, also getting the property that you want.
I think you're right. I mean, they negotiate sort of a balance between getting what they want and also doing what the community needs, which is to take over the land, right? So you're saying, I mean, and I think this is another really kind of interesting example. And we see this again with the daughters of Zelophehad at the end of this portion. The people think through this whole law about letting women inherit, and they think, you know what, maybe this isn't such a great idea, because what if they marry into other tribes and now all the land is going to go to this other tribe? So they amend the law, which is saying, well, okay, women can inherit, but they have to marry within the same tribe. So these are both examples of how the law evolves. Our tradition evolves over time. It's not one thing forever and ever. I mean, frankly, the religion that we follow now is a result of lots of evolution, change, saying, well, what does this actually mean in real life? Or are we going to take this literally? Or are we going to make it accommodate more to real life? So, any other comments?
And marry my Italian sweetheart's out of the question, right? I'm gonna marry the guy anyway. You guys get ready. The rabbi will be there.
Yeah, well, you're not going to inherit back in ancient Israel.
Okay, but
you're out of luck.
It's okay. It's like Barbara Streisand and James Brolin. It'll be all right.
Seems to have worked for a while. Okay, I don't really have any more. I thought this was going to take a little longer, but if there are any comments, we can. Oh yes, Larry, you're muted, Larry.
So the emphasis here, like in other places in the Torah, seems to be on community first and individual second, which, you know, as I understand it, is the way their social and economic structures were based back then. I mean, in that sense, this story seems to be consistent with their tradition, our tradition, as it was back then. I mean, since then, we've become more of an individualistic society, and that balance seems to have shifted a little bit. But this story seems to emphasize the point that the Torah makes over and over again, that When you act selfishly, you are harming the community. And when you put community first, good things happen to you.
Interesting.
I like that. I like that. That's really sweet when you help the community. So even though I'm going to marry an Italian man, I'm going to temple and he's coming to temple too.
Thank you,
Come on, we
Don.
have the
Are
black,
there
we have the, yeah.
any response to what Larry said? Do we agree with him? Yes, Merle, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I do agree. It's pure logic that, you know, if you're helping, if you're being helpful to whatever your community is, the group as a whole, whether it's family or not, is going to benefit. If you're selfish, as those of us who have been involved in Jewish communal service for most of our lives, you see it does harm the community. Doesn't necessarily hurt you as an individual, but it hurts the community. They don't get what they need.
Well,
And
if you're developing yourself as a person, don't you have more to contribute to the world, the Jewish community as a whole?
If you choose to give to the community. And I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to be money. In those days, it could be animals. It could be whatever you have that the community is in need of. But if you're not giving them what they need, today it's pretty much based on money or money to provide something. But then I think it was probably primarily animals and food and land.
Well, it seems to me that the Reubenites and the Gadites, they are doing their part as far as the commandment that God gave them. Okay, we're going to help you settle the land, but they don't take it the next step, which is to actually live in the land. So it's a kind of an interesting contradiction. They're sort of getting, they're doing what needs to be done and what they've been told to do, and then they're kind of sneaking out the back and ending up getting what they want. Mara, Harv. And then Rabbi Stan.
So the end of this double portion talks about the daughters of Zelophehad and their inheritance. And I think it's interesting, given what you've brought up, that the portion ends with assuring that women will also have a portion in the land that we're entering.
Good point. As long as they don't have any brothers, right?
Right. And I thought at services last night, Rabbi Elkin talked about Numbers ending with examples of the notion of the importance of justice. And so I think everything you've brought up is also about the importance of justice in our community and wherever we live.
Interesting. Good point. Stan?
I would hate to see a whole Shabbat go by without my being grouchy. It would be so atypical. When I read the story, it sounds so contemporary. Moses has spent a heck of a lot of time trying to convince the people, we call it promised land, whatever it is. This is the land that's going to signify the covenant between God and the people, Okay? So we all have, and he keeps saying it, and he keeps saying it, and when they get to the borders, two tribes figure, well, you know, maybe it's sure that land is good, but you know, that one over there isn't bad either. They haven't bought, is it right to say, Donna, haven't bought the full dream? They
haven't, they don't have total buy-in.
They don't have total buy-in. And then I think, God forbid, about our own world, we talk about land of Israel, the Jewish people, the state, the connection, and the rabbis, all of us do such a great job in talking about it. But the question is whether the people are buying in. And that's a different question, because I have a feeling, just like in the centers you chose, the end of the day, I guess the other tribes would have gone if they had nothing else. But here's something else, and the dream takes second place. And that makes me feel grouchy, because I think it's very, very real. We assume they buy in. And in fact, there's a lot that doesn't happen. Thank you.
It's very real. Very, very real. Steve. You're muted.
It seems that what we have in this portion, however, is a very small plot of land defined as the promised land. The land that Reuben and Gad wanted are well within the land that many people believe was promised. And as we know, some believe all the land from the Tigris and Euphrates to the Mediterranean is the promised land. So how do we know what exactly are the right boundaries? And this seems to suggest a very, very narrow vision of a promised land, which I think would surprise a lot of these settlers and people going even beyond the settlements and, you know, who are going way out there these days.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The only thing I can think of is that they've specifically been told to cross the Jordan. And maybe they're taking that very literally. But you're right. It's like, why not take it on the other side? We just conquered all this land. Seems kind of practical to me, but I don't think that's not what God said.
Yeah, I think some Haredi disagree with me.
I'm sure they would. I think they would disagree with this entire proceeding, quite honestly. Stan, did you have something else you wanted to say? Or your hand's just up? No? No. Okay. I think the other thing to notice is that this is all very interesting, because all that Moses is talking about with these people, this is all going to happen after he's dead. You know, he knows that he is going to die before they cross the Jordan. So he's kind of, in some ways, managing from the grave what's going to happen after him, which is kind of depressing from his point of view, but it's sort of interesting from our point of view. This is what we call succession planning. Okay, well, actually, it is that time. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's time for us to do the Kaddish. And
Donna, can I just toss in and say, thank you very, very much. You're the first, if you will, regular member of the Chevra Torah to take the responsibility of teaching and leading. And you know what, guys? That's the dream of any teacher, that there will be those who will pick up the process going forward. So Donna, just thank you. Just thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you, Donna. This was great.
Thank you, Donna. We love you. Thank you. Say hi, Stanley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hi,
Donna.
Merle.
Okay,
Be well, Stanley. Be well.
Yes, feel better.
Love you too.
Get
So-
better, Stanley, very fast, please. Thank you,
Yes.
Donna.
Very welcome. So,
Very nice, Donna.
remember those who have passed away during the past month: Lillian Aber, Stephen Dressner, Richard Dunner, Lawrence Scott Epstein, Helen Fleischman, Hillard Hilly Gordon, Ida Gordon, Merrill Podolsky, Charles Schwartz, Rosalind Roz Weissman. And we also remember those who have died defending the United States of America and the state of Israel. And we remember also the people who died at this same time in the past. Naim Afari, Max Benjamin Aronzon, Moise Bergman, Charlotte Blatace, Max Bloch, Ben Boyer, Michael Brockman, Benjamin Birkin, Stephen Chorna, Matthew Kodon, Daniel Kolner, Myron Koretz, Hal Koski, Dora Dan, Robert Ellison, Harry Farkas, Ralph Feinstein, Saul Furman, Edith Fisher, Zelda Foreman, Helen Freeman, Sheldon Allen Geller, Max Goldstein, Peter Grad, Leslie Handelsman, Arthur Hartman, Aaron Horowitz, Murray Itzkowitz, Farouk Javaharian, Edward Kalmar, Albert Karmazin, Gertrude Klein, Musa Kohanzadeh, Harry Krakoff, Theodore Kraut, Henry Kreshik, Manny Kugler, Emery Lefkowitz, Harriet Lehman, Marquetta Lissac, Lottie Levy, Max Lieberman, Yoni Licht, Benjamin Lind, Alicia Lindheim, Pauline Leubman, Sidel Lynn, Jane Meyerson, Emilio Molinari, George Morgan, Aubrey Morris, Arnold Mullins, Rita Norton, Mo Austin, Bobby Pearson, Spalding Phillip, I think it's Philip Spalding, Edgar Phillips, Thomas Pollock, Mitchell Price, Betty Prince, John Reisenbach, Paula Ritter, Gilbert Robinson, Donald Rose, Frank Rosenfeld, Electra Rosner, Florence Roth, Vivan Rowe, Belle Royce, Eva Ruvelson, Julia Sachs, Jean Schrager, Jessica Allison Schroeder, Jeanette Schumann, Fred Schwartz, Gussie Sobolski, Stephen Shaw, Joseph Schumann, Judy Ann Siegel, Marion Sornoff, Louis Sparrow, Anita Starkman, Joanne Stern, Alice Stewart, Patsy Sultan, Marion Tashman, David Warren, Jonathan Weiss, Julius Ween, Rabbi Alfred Wolf, Lawrence Wolfen, Mimi Wolfen. And we hold in our hearts all the others that we remember or are in our own heart. And we acknowledge those who have died defending the state of Israel and those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. So if it is your custom to rise, please rise for the Kaddish. And where is it? Hold on. Ready? Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah. V'alma divra cherutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael. V'agala v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitchaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'yitru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Amen. And Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Thank you.
shalom. Love you.
Shabbat shalom and thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thank you,
miss you. We
Donna.
love you.
This is
Get better,
great, Donna.
Stanley. Thank
Good
you,
stuff.
Donna. Bye-bye.